Hi, this is Phil Lawson, Senior Software Integration Engineer for AppSense, here to give you a run through of securing your server estates with role-based access. So this is all linked to a blog with the same title, and this is part one. So this is taking control of who is logging on to your server as an administrator. So I've got a server, and your administrators group will possibly look like it will more than likely have the built-in administrator in there, unless you've disabled it or removed it. It's more than likely to have domain admins in as well. It may also have all sorts of other users in there. So we need to understand why those users are in there. It may be for reasons such as the detail I've given in the blog, which is they may need access to IIS in order to access the Internet Information Services console. You need to be an administrator. There may be another reason. They may be running a service on the server, so they may have used their own account as a service account. They may be running a scheduled task with their own user account. So we really need to understand this group in order to then be able to take control. So once we've looked down the services list of the server, so I'll just fire up services, we need to first of all run down there and check that no one's running a service with their own user account. Things like such as, I don't know, the client push account used for SCCM requires administrative access. It will need to be a member of the administrators group. But you shouldn't be using a user account in order to do this. Simple reason for that is because if the password is changed by that user, that service will fail to launch or fail to run, and you're in a whole world of pain. So that's where all the service accounts requiring administrative access on the server will be placed. We also have a second group, which is the server admins group. So all these groups need to be created in AD. Your domain admins will already be there, and the built-in administrator is obviously the local administrator on the actual server itself. You can look at disabling that account if you wish, and you can. There's plenty of articles on MS.net for that. So that's the administrators group. Also need to look at the remote desktop users group. So we need to understand if there's anyone in there, why they're in there. Once we understand that, we can start moving on to the role-based access, which I'm talking about, which I'll get to in a bit more in part one and more in part two. So in an ideal world, we really want to be able to log users on as non-admins, but give them elevated privileges to the consoles and applications they require. Be very specific about it, rather than having to put them in the administrators group on the server, and that results in them having absolutely full control of the server. They can do anything, add, remove programs, you name it, they can do it. There'll also be more in part 3 on a kiosk mode, so being able to log the users on using Environment Manager. We can set up a configuration that allows us to log them on and give them a non-desktop experience, so they still get the consoles and applications they require, but only that. So that's something to sort of look forward to in part 3. So for now, we're looking at very much how we control who is and who isn't logging on as administrator. So in order to do that, in order to set this group up to look like this, or rather the entire server estate, we need to set up a group policy. So this is performed on best places, probably your domain controller, logged on as a domain admin. We launch the GPMC, the Group Policy Management Console, and create a new policy object. So that's performed there in the tree. We then create a new OU, ideally within the existing server OU structure, and we link that new policy to that OU. So that's performed using link the existing group policy. Once we've done that, we need to make sure that that policy is taking precedence. So one is the policy that's applied last, so it's going to take precedence over anything else. So I've put it 2 here, but ideally it should really be 1. It should really be 1. So we then look at the policy itself. So we just right click and edit, and then we go in there. I'll show you how I've prepared the policy. So here's one I made earlier. So first of all, we've got the in the list we've got the deny log on locally. So that's allowing me to place all the service accounts that require administrative privileges on the server within one group, but deny them log on locally. Service accounts don't need the rights to log on to a server locally. So that's stopping anyone that basically knows the password for the service account effectively having a backdoor administrator account onto the server. Prime example of this is the SCCM client push account. So you'll see Microsoft do recommend that this setting is applied as part of the SCCM setup. The second one down, this is an optional thing. Definitely needs some thought before you start thinking about using it. It does come with a number of caveats. Have a look on MS TechNet for details on this, but you can disable the built administrator account from being used. So once you disable that, can cause you a few problems if you do want to use it. I think you can, in order to use the account, you need to drop the server into a work group and launch in safe mode or things like that. Do more research on MS TechNet if you're going to use that policy. And then we get into the real the meat of things, which is the restricted groups here. So you can see here I'm now controlling the built-in administrators group for any server within this OU to only contain these groups and accounts. So those accounts or members are a reflection of here. If anyone does choose to add a group or an account in there, it will get stripped out by policy when it's enforced, which I think by default is every 15 minutes or when the server is rebooted. We also have the built-in remote desktop users group, which I'll talk about a bit more in a sec, and that's going to be then again that's a reflection of that. So G remote server users is a member of that. So you need to create these AD groups before you edit the policy, and you can see I've created my AD groups for this under an OU called server roles. So see I've got a few, you can get a taster for where I'm headed here, which is the GIS allow. So that's going to be for the Internet Information Services console, so allowing users that are members of that group the ability to launch that console, but only that console. You'll see more of that in part 2 when I talk about the lockdown itself. The AppSense allow, so that's going to be for consoles and the the server configuration utility and server configuration portal, and disk management and perfmon. So let's just return to the policy. So once I've applied that policy, I can then move machines within AD to that server's OU. That's only after I've really sort of taken a good look around, and I've looked at, checked there's no scheduled tasks that are running by administrators that are members of users that are members of the administrators group. And again, with services, I'm making sure that there's no services running with a user that's a member of the administrators group, either directly a member or via a nested group, because if you do move the server into the OU, it will strip out members and it could cause problems. So once you're comfortable with that, you can then look at moving the server into the new server's OU. And once you've done that, reboot the server, ensure the policy's enforced. You can do that probably the best way once you've rebooted. Do an RSOP, so that will give you a resilient set of policies, and you can then ensure that your policy is applying. You can also probably do a GP results R. So we can see here, look at my administrator, I can see that the members have been controlled by that source group policy. So so once we've moved the server in, checked that the policy is applying, we can then look at the services, make sure that all services are up and running, or all required services are up and running, and that the all running, and the in event viewer check that there's no errors in there. Okay, so that's how we've now taken control of who is and who isn't an administrator on the server. But now we need to then move on to the role-based access. So how are we then ensuring that people that do have a genuine need to log on to a server and access consoles, such as IIS, can still do that? So that's where we move on to the role-based access, which I'll touch on now, but I'll talk about more in part 2. But that is essentially, we've got these groups which are members of the remote server users global group. So it's nested within there. Within there, we're going to put the members or the users that require the access. So we need to understand before moving users in who needs what before we strip away access from them. So once we understand that, we can then set these role-based groups up, put the users in there, make that a member of the remote servers group, and then we move on to application manager. So that is then allowing these users that are logging on as non-admins the ability to launch an elevated console or application, and only that. So you'll see the lockdown and that in action in part 2. So I'll catch you in part 2. Thank you very much.